Hey guys, so welcome back. Today we'll be going over exam questions when it comes to factors and prime factorization. Our first set of questions is going to list all of the positive factors. So our first example is the number 30. So we need to list all of the positive factors for the number 30. First, we have 1 times 30. That will give me 30. Then we have 2 times 15. That will give me 30. We have 3 times 10. And then we have 5 times 6. So your positive factors are going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, 15, and 30. Let's try the number 28. Let's list the positive factors. First, we have 1 times 28. That will give me 28. Next, we have 2 times 14. And then you have 4 times 7. So the positive factors for number 28 is 1, 2, 4, 7, 14, and 28. Let's try the number 60. So first, we have 1 times 60. These are two factors here. 1 is a factor and number 60 is a factor. Then you have 2 times 30. Next, we have 3 times 20. Next, we have 4 times 15. 5 times 12. And then you have 6 times 10. So your positive factors are all of these numbers, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, and 60. All right, let's look at the number 68. Let's write all of the positive factors. So 1 times 68. 2 times 34, and then you have 4 times 17. So your positive factors are 1, 2, 4, 17, 34, and 68. Let's try the number 85. Positive factors, we have 1 times 85, and you have 5 times 17. So for the number 85, we only have 4 positive factors. We have 1, 5, 17, and 85. All right, what about the number 96? So we have 1 times 96, 2 times 48, 3 times 32, 4 times 24, 6 times 16, and then you have 8 times 12. So the positive factors for 96, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 16, 24, 32, 48, and 96. Let's look at the number 86. The positive factors are 1 times 86, and then you have 2 times 43. So the factors are 1, 2, 43, and 86. Number 22, let's list all the positive factors. So we have 1 times 22, and then you have 2 times 11. So the positive factors are 1, 2, 11, and 22. And guys, when you are listing your positive factors, make sure you write it out like this here. Okay, let's try 16. So factors are 1 and 16. 1 times 16 will give me 16. We have 2 times 8. And we also have 4 times 4. So how many factors do we have? So all of these are positive factors: 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. So when you have two numbers like this, you can just write it one time. So your factors are going to be 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. What about the number 87? So first we have 1 times 87, and then we have 3 times 29. So your factors are going to be 1, 3, 29, and 87. What about the number 99? Let's go ahead and list all our factors. We have 1 times 99. We have 3 times 33. And we also have 9 times 11. So your factors are 1, 3, 9, 11, 33, and 99. Let's try 75, the number 75. So we have 1 times 75, 3 times 25, and you also have 5 times 15. So your factors, your positive factors are 1, 3, 5, 15, 25, and 75. What about the number 74? So we have 1 times 74, and you have 2 times 37. Okay, so 1 times 74 is 74, and then 2 times 37 will also give me 74. So my positive factors are 1, 2, 37, and 74. All right, and let's try 72. So we know 1 times 72 will give me 72, 2 times 36, 3 times 24, 4 times 18, we have 6 times 12, and then we also have 8 times 9. So your positive factors are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, 12, 18, 24, 36, and 72. Okay, so your next set of questions is to write the prime power factorization. So let's say for an example, if I gave you the number 48, and we need to write the prime power factorization of the number 48. So first I'm going to go ahead and break this down using my factor tree. All right, and when I use my factor tree, so if I break down my 48, I know that 3 times 16 will give me 48. And I'm going to go ahead and break down my 16 into 4 times 4. And then I can also break down my 4s into 2 times 2. And this 4 can also be broken down into 2 times 2. Okay, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 2's. So I'm going to write 2 to the 4th power times 3. So your prime power factorization is 2 to the 4th power times 3. What about the number 35? If I do a factor tree, I'm going to get 5 times 7. So the prime power factorization is just going to be 5 times 7. And this is your final answer here. What about the number 46? So if I use my factor tree, I know I can do 2 times 23. So your prime power factorization, I can no longer factor these numbers. So your prime power factorization is just going to be 2 times 23. And this is your final answer here. Let's try 100. If I use my factor tree, I'm going to break this down into 5 times 20. I cannot factor my 5 anymore, but I can factor my 20. My 20 I can factor into 5 times 4. And then my 4 I can break down into 2 times 2. So now I am left with all prime numbers. I can no longer factor. So my prime power factorization is going to be 2 to the 2nd power, since I have 2 2's, times 5 to the 2nd power, since I have 2 5's. And this is your final answer. Let's try the number 75. I'm going to factor this into 3 times 25. My 3 is a prime number. I can no longer factor anymore, but I can factor my 25 into 5 times 5. Left with prime numbers. I cannot factor anymore. So your final answer is 3 times 5 to the second power. Let's look at the number 80. I can factor my 80 into 5 times 16. My 5 cannot be factored anymore, but I can factor my 16 into 4 times 4. And I can further factor my 4s into 2 times 2, and then this other 4 into 2 times 2. Okay, so I have 4 2's. So that's going to be 2 to the 4th power times your 5, which is here. Let's try 972. And we want to write the prime power factorization of 972. So I'm going to go ahead and factor my 972 into 4 times 243. 243 times 4 is going to give me 972. I can further factor my 4 into 2 times 2. And I can further factor my 243 into 81 times 3. I can no longer factor this 2, or this 3, but I can factor this 81 here. So if I factor this 81, I'm going to get 9 times 9. And then I'm going to further factor this 9 into 3 times 3, and this other 9 as well into 3 times 3. Okay, so now I have prime numbers all left. So now I can go ahead and write my prime power factorization. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3's, 3 to the 5th power, and 2 2's. So 2 to the 2nd power times 3 to the 5th power is my final answer. Let's look at the number 40. So I can factor my 40 into 5 times 8. I cannot factor my 5 anymore, but I can factor this 8 into 2 times 4, and I can factor this 4 into 2 times 2. Okay, so now I have prime numbers left. So my prime power factorization is going to be 2 to the 3rd power times 5. Let's try the number 44. I can factor my 44 into 4 times 11. I cannot factor this 11 anymore, but I can factor this 4 into 2 times 2. So now I am left with prime numbers. So your final answer is going to be 2 to the 2nd power times 11. Let's try the number 72. I can factor my 72 into 2 times 36. I can continue factoring my 36 into 3 times 12. My 12 can be factored into 3 times 4, and my 4 can be factored into 2 times 2. I now have prime numbers left. I cannot factor anymore. So I have 1, 2, 3 2's. So I'm going to write 2 to the 3rd power times 3 to the 2nd power because I have 2 3's. Let's look at the number 81. I'm going to factor my 81 into 3 times 27. I cannot factor this 3 anymore, but I can factor this 27 into 3 times 9. And then this 9 can be factored into 3 times 3. So now I am left with all prime numbers. So my prime power factorization is going to be 3 to the 4th power. It's your final answer. What about the number 54? I can factor 54 into 2 times 27. My 27 can be factored into 3 times 9. And then my 9 can be factored into 3 times 3. All right. I am now left with prime numbers. So my prime power factorization is going to be 2 times 3 to the third power. This is your final answer. Let's try 660. I can factor my 660 into 11 times 60. 11 is a prime number, so I'm going to leave that alone. I can factor my 60 into 5 times 12. And then my 12 can be factored into 3 times 4. And then my 4 can be factored into 2 times 2. I am now left with prime numbers. So my prime factorization is going to be 2 to the second power times 3 times 5 times 11. So this is your final answer. All right, so let's say if you had to write the prime power factorization of 16y. I can factor my 16y into 16 times y. My 16 can be factored into 4 times 4. And then your 4 can be factored into 2 times 2. And this 4 can also be factored into 2 times 2. All right. I am now left with prime numbers, and then you have your variable here. So your prime power factorization is going to be 2 to the fourth power times y. So let's try 8z. So my factor is going to be 8 times z. 8 can be factored into 2 times 4. And your 4 can be factored into 2 times 2. All right, I am left with prime numbers. So you have 2 to the third power times z. Let's try 10y squared. So this is 10 times y squared. I can factor my 10 into 2 times 5. And now I am left with prime numbers. So I cannot factor anymore. So you're left with 2 times 5 times y squared. Let's try this example here, 21x to the third power. So this is 21 times x cubed. My 21 can factor into 3 times 7, and I am left with prime numbers. So your prime power factorization is going to be 3 times 7 times x cubed. So let's try 84ab. So this is going to be 84 times a times b. I can factor my 84 into 2 times 42. My 42 can be factored into 2 times 21, and my 21 can be factored into 3 times 7. I am now left with prime numbers. So my prime power factorization is going to be 2 to the second power times 3 times 7 times a times b. Let's try this example, 52yz. I can separate my 52 times y times z. I can factor my 52 into 13 times 4. My 13 is a prime number, cannot further factor, but I can factor this 4 into 2 times 2. And now I am left with prime numbers. So your final answer is going to be 2 to the second power times 13 times y times z. This is going to be your prime power factorization. Let's try 82ab. I can separate my 82 times a times b. My 82 can be factored into 2 times 41. Okay, and I am now left with prime numbers. So your prime power factorization is going to be 2 times 41 times a times b. And this is your final answer. Let's try 28x. I can separate my 28 times x. My 28 can be separated into 7 times 4. And I can factor my 4 into 2 times 2. I am left with prime numbers now. So your final answer is going to be 2 to the second power times 7 times x. Let's try 18xy. I can separate 18 times x times y. I can factor my 18 into 2 times 9. I can also factor my 9 into 3 times 3. I am now left with prime numbers. My final answer is going to be 2 times 3 to the second power times x times y. 20b squared. I can separate my 20b squared, 20 times b squared. I can separate my 20 into 2 times 10. My 10 can factor into 2 times 5. I am now left with prime numbers. I cannot factor any further, so my final answer is going to be 2 to the second power times 5 times b squared. Let's try 55y. I can separate my 55y into 55 times y. My 55 can factor into 5 times 11. Since I am now left with prime numbers, I cannot factor anymore. My prime power factorization is going to be 5 times 11 times y. This is your final answer. Let's try this example here, 78a to the third power. I'm going to separate into 78 times a to the third power. My 78 can factor into 6 times 13. My 13 is a prime number. I cannot factor any further, but I can factor the 6 into 2 times 3. Now I am left with prime numbers, so my final answer is going to be 2 times 3 times 13 times a to the third power. Let's try 26x squared. I'm going to separate my 26 into 26 times x squared. My 26 can be factored into 2 times 13. Since I am left with prime numbers, I cannot factor any further. So my final answer is going to be 2 times 13 times x squared. Okay, so let's try the next set of questions. This time we're going to write the prime factorization, but we are not using exponents. So for an example, if I have the number 25n squared, I'm going to separate my 25 times n, because we're not using exponents this time. I can factor my 25 into 5 times 5. And since I am left with prime numbers, I cannot factor any further. So your final answer is going to be 5 times 5 times n times n. This time we are not using exponents. Let's look at 12a. Okay, I'm going to separate into 12 times a. My 12 can be factored into 3 times 4. And my 4 can be factored into 2 times 2. Since I cannot factor any further, I have prime numbers left. So my factorization is going to be 2 times 2 times 3 times a. This is your final answer. Okay, so let's try 81a. I can separate into 81 times a. I'm going to factor my 81 into 9 times 9. And my 9s can be factored into 3 times 3. Okay, I am now left with prime numbers. So my prime factorization is going to be 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times a. And this is your final answer. Remember, we are not using exponents. Let's try 36 x cubed. I'm going to separate into 36 times x times x times x. My 36 can factor into 3 times 12. My 3 is already a prime number. I can factor my 12 into 3 times 4. And then my 4 can factor into 2 times 2. I am now left with prime numbers. So my prime factorization is going to be 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times x times x times x. What about 48x squared? Separate into 48 times x times x. My 48 can factor into 3 times 16. 3 is already a prime number. I can factor the 16 into 4 times 4. My 4 can be factored into 2 times 2, and this other 4 into 2 times 2. So my prime factorization is going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times x times x. And this is your final answer. Let's try 18x squared. So I'm going to separate into 18 times x times x. My 18 can factor into 2 times 9, and my 9 can factor into 3 times 3. Okay, I now have prime numbers left. I cannot factor any further. So your final answer is going to be 2 times 3 times 3 times x times x. What if we had 18xy? It's very similar to what we just did, except I have xy. I'm going to separate my 18 into 2 times 9, and then my 9 into 3 times 3. So your prime factorization is going to be 2 times 3 times 3 times x times y. Let's try 21y squared. I can separate into 21 times y times y. My 21 can factor into 3 times 7, and I cannot factor any further. I now have prime numbers left, so my prime factorization is going to be 3 times 7 times y times y. Remember, we are not using exponents for this section. Let's look at 92q. I'm going to separate into 92 times q. My 92 can factor into 2 times 46. And my 46 can factor into 2 times 23. I am now left with prime numbers. So my prime factorization is going to be 2 times 2 times 23 times q. This is your final answer. What about 24h? I can separate into 24 times h. My 24 can be factored into 2 times 12. And my 12 can be factored into 3 times 4. And I can also factor my 4 into 2 times 2. Since I am now left with prime numbers, so my prime factorization, 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times h. All right, let's try 50x. I can separate into 50 times x. My 50 can factor into 2 times 25. My 25 can factor into 5 times 5. I now have prime numbers left, so my prime factorization is going to be 2 times 5 times 5 times x. And this is your final answer. All right, guys, so that is all we have for today, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.